All you Christians worshiping Jesus Christ may actually be worshiping the Germanic, Nordic god Wotan, or Odin, rebranded as a westernized rabbi to make Christianity stick in Europe. Let me explain further. Christianity didn't just arrive in Europe and take over with its existing canon dogma and rules, all of which originated in Second Temple rabbinical Judaism from the Middle East. The early days of Christianity, we're told, were marked by persecution under figures like Nero in the Ad 40 Seconds. But when you dig into the facts, you realize that narrative is mostly false. If there were any persecutions, they were isolated incidents involving particular groups of Christians who instigated conflicts. These early Christians were not what we think of today. They were radical Jewish sectarians. There was nothing Christian about them in the way we understand it now. They were Jewish zealots who had broken away from mainstream Judaism in Roman Judea, intent on overthrowing the Roman Empire, at least in their region. And on a broader scale, they succeeded in infiltrating and eventually dismantling the Roman Empire from within. These zealots, including figures like Jesus Christ and his circle of followers, were seen as fringe lunatics by mainstream Judaism of the time. That's why you see clashes between Jesus' movement and the rabbis of Jerusalem. Jesus' so-called disciples, characters like Simon Peter, Rocky Petra the Knife, and Judas Iscariot, were zealots, insurgents aiming to challenge Roman authority. At the time, the term Messiah in Judaism wasn't unique. Dozens of individuals in Jerusalem alone were claiming to be messiahs during that period, as Catherine Nixie notes in The Darkening Age. And contrary to the popular narrative, early Christians weren't being slaughtered en masse by pagans. Instead, radical Jewish offshoots, these early Christians were targeting pagans, destroying temples, and smashing idols. This obsession with idols stems directly from Jewish theology, especially the idea that statues or artistic depictions of human forms house demons. That's why early Christians destroyed statues, smashed their noses, and obliterated pagan monuments. They carried this zeal into the Roman Empire, where they were initially a fringe group viewed with suspicion. The supposed persecution by Nero, it wasn't because Christians were peaceful martyrs, it was because they were accused of instigating riots, possibly even the Great Fire of Rome. Nero's retaliation wasn't an attack on their religion, it was a punishment for their actions. Fast forward to the later centuries, and we see how these radical Jewish sectarians evolved into a powerful movement. By the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD, they had gained significant influence, lobbying for tolerance while simultaneously undermining the classical pagan structures of Rome. Once Christianity gained power, the roles reversed. They turned their violence and fanaticism against the pagans who had once tolerated them. The destruction of the Library of Alexandria and the murder of Hypatia are prime examples of this Christian aggression. Early Christians obliterated pagan temples, libraries, and knowledge centers, all while rewriting history to portray themselves as the persecuted. Even today, most people don't realize that it was Christians who destroyed the Library of Alexandria, not some vague, unknown force. This entire history has been buried or distorted, just like the rebranding of Odin as Jesus Christ. Christianity didn't conquer Europe through divine truth or spiritual enlightenment. It did so by plagiarizing and repackaging pagan beliefs, erasing cultural heritage, and imposing its authority through violence and manipulation. It's funny how Christians will call pagans devil worshippers or idolaters, yet they fail to realize their entire religion is built on stealing from those same pagans. They go on about Jesus Christ as if he's some unique divine figure, but the truth is, Jesus is Odin. Not a version of Odin, not inspired by Odin. He's a rip-off. The early church knew that it couldn't sell the story of a Jewish Messiah to Germanic and Nordic peoples without tweaking it. These were warriors, people who worshipped gods like Thor and Odin, deities tied to strength, wisdom, and sacrifice. So, what did the church do? It stole from their myths. They took the story of Odin hanging from Yggdrasil, sacrificing himself to gain wisdom, and rebranded it. Jesus on the cross, same story, different packaging. But that wasn't enough. They didn't just steal myths, they had to completely hijack entire cultures. Pagan festivals became Christian holidays. Yule became Christmas. Ostara became Easter. The cross itself isn't even Christian. It's an ancient pagan symbol. Christianity didn't convert Europe through divine truth. It converted it by stealing, repurposing, and whitewashing pagan traditions to the point where most people don't even realize it anymore. The irony? Christians will attack paganism as false or satanic, completely oblivious to the fact that their Jesus is nothing more than a plagiarized composite of pagan gods, with Odin as the template. It's not about faith, it's about theft. They don't want to accept that, but it's true. There's absolute historical evidence for it. The Christians were vicious, and the reason they were vicious is the same reason these radicals were vicious in Second Temple Judaism. They were zealots. They believed their God was the only God, and that all other gods were false. Therefore, anything representing these other gods had to be destroyed. This psychosis repeats across monotheistic faiths, not just Christianity, but Islam as well. As Christianity spread through the Roman Empire, it wasn't about Jesus Christ being a gentle, hippie figure saying, "Love thy neighbor." That sanitized version comes much later, after Christianity was co-opted as the state religion of Rome under Constantine and Theodosius. Before that, Christianity was a brutal system infiltrating and corroding the Roman world from within. When it became the state religion, it rebranded. It had to. Why? Because Roman and Greek civilizations were European. They were pagans. They worshipped ancestors, nature spirits, and gods deeply tied to their worldviews. You couldn't just shove a Middle Eastern Jewish messiah down their throats. You had to sell them something they could relate to. That's where the big con comes in. Jesus Christ is Odin. Not might be, not a shadow of. He's a rip-off. This isn't some poetic theory, it's the cold, hard truth about how Christianity rebranded itself to conquer the pagan world. The church didn't destroy pagan beliefs outright, it absorbed them, repackaged them, and slapped a Christian label on top. Take Odin, for example. Odin hangs himself from Yggdrasil, the world tree, for 9 days and nights. He sacrifices himself to gain the wisdom of the runes. Jesus, he hangs on a tree, the cross, sacrifices himself for humanity, and emerges with divine wisdom and salvation. Sound familiar? That's not coincidence, it's cultural theft, plain and simple. The Catholic Church took this myth and remixed it into Christianity to appeal to Germanic, Nordic, and other European pagans. Jung wasn't being speculative when he said, Wotan is the Christ of the Germanic people. He was laying bare the truth. Jesus is a plagiarized version of Odin. Christianity stole the archetypes, symbols, and myths that resonated with Europeans and passed them off as its own. This wasn't just limited to Odin. The church rebranded pagan festivals, symbols, and practices to smooth over the transition. Christmas, a co-opted winter solstice festival. Easter, originally about fertility and rebirth tied to pagan deities. The architecture of churches, modeled after pagan temples. Even the saints, thinly veiled versions of older gods and spirits. The entire Christian package was designed to look familiar enough to convert the pagan masses. But at its core, it's a fraud or repackaging of European spiritual traditions under the guise of a Middle Eastern God-man. The sanitized image of Jesus as a benevolent savior is a later invention meant to make Christianity seem universal. But strip away the layers of revision, and what you find is a counterfeit, a Christ cobbled together from stolen myths, with Odin at the heart of it.